Slurpty dizzerp, my G's. I'm very sorry, but I'm extremely tired today. I didn't sleep very well last night. Didn't get anywhere near enough sleep. However, I have done the work for you guys. I've done the break. So, as I mentioned yesterday, today I wanted to do a little tutorial on how I can chop up a break and put it into different channels, and the reason why we do it, and some cool things that become open to us once we do that and don't just leave it as just one break on the channel for the mix down, you know. So anyway, if I ramble a bit or if I'm not super concise today, then please accept my apology, because I'm a little bit shattered. But let's get into it. So anyway, I've improved the beat a little bit, and I've made this whole sort of drum group out of the break that I had before with a couple of extra little things, and I've slightly moved around the basses a little bit to get a better groove, and this is what we got so far. So keeping it very, very, very short still, 2-bar loop, but it does sound pretty cool to me at the moment. Anyway, what we're doing with the drums then is I've basically used this one break here is the sort of main break, you know, and we're basically just chopping that up to create something which is more like this. Now, the best thing about splitting up the break is we're able to obviously like sidechain things individually to different parts of the drum beat. So for example, if we wanted to sidechain stuff only to the kick or only to the snare, then we can do that now that it's on different channels, okay? And the idea with this break was there's a few things I wanted to improve on it. I wanted to replace the kick with a different one, and I want to have control over the snare and the hats separately as well. So what I've done is I've chopped up the break and put it onto different channels essentially. The important thing to note is if you're chopping up the break and putting it on different channels, you might lose the flow of the break, because a break naturally has like a sort of flow to it, you know. It's got like there's sort of like a room sound that's like in the break, and like if you start to chop it up too much, you'll like that room sound like will feel a bit glitchy and a bit like choppy, and you'll lose the flow of the break. Okay, so it's important to do your chopping right, and obviously when you chop stuff, make sure you like fade the files at the beginning and end if they need to avoid the clicks, you know. And so the first thing I've done here is I wanted to separate the kick. So I chopped out the kick, put it on a different channel, and I still wanted to use like the top end of it. So I've just taken off the transient with the attack down on the transient shaper, and I've taken out a bunch of low end. So it just sort of sounds like this. But especially that first one, that first hit has like a nice, like a little sort of distorted crash on it. And I wanted to keep that on. So I've layered it in with my other kick, which is just a sample from my sample pack, the Neurofunk Toolbox. It's an old sample pack, but if you guys want to download it, there's like a fair few decent individual drum shots in there. Good kicks and snares that like are punchy, tight, ready to go. And you can make them your own by adding new layers on top of them, but they will provide a very tight foundation always. So that's the good thing about that sample pack. Even if it's a little bit old, it's still got very usable drum hits. So this is my like sort of fat punchy one underneath, and then we've got the like top end from the break kick on top. And obviously it was great to chop that on a different channel so that I could, you know, EQ that, but now we can keep the other parts in. So the next thing is the hats. So I've left the hats in the break here. I've left the same pattern, the same exact pattern from the break. I've just chopped out, obviously, the other parts. But what I've been able to do on the hats now is I've been able to EQ them, firstly, because if you look in the actual hat sort of folder, channel, there's like a bit of a weird sound there where you get loads of low end. And also, I just want to tighten up the low end anyway. and only have the necessary information. Nothing too low that doesn't need to be there. Then with the gain as well, been able to turn them up a bit because I thought they were a little bit quiet in the break, so I've actually been able to boost the hats separately there as well, which is nice. So now we've got our kick and the hats, so sounding like this. So let's add in the snare quickly. And again, obviously, I've just chopped out the snare from the break, put it on a different channel. And again, all I've done is cleaned it up by taking out some low end. It doesn't need to be there because there's all this sort of subby part in the snare, which I really, really don't want. So I've been able to just chop that off. Another great reason to separate the break. And then again, with the volume here, I'm actually taking it down a little bit. Because, yeah, I always want to have that dynamic control of all of the drum hits myself, you know, because sometimes I feel like it could be different to what the break actually is, you know, even if just a little bit. So next, what I actually did then was I took one of the hats from the sort of hat part, and I've reused it again on another channel to fill in the sort of extra gaps. So now I've got this like extra one-shot hat on top of the kick and snare, helps tie them together a bit more, and gives like even more, yeah, just a little bit more like more hats going on basically, because I felt like it could use more. And on this like new hat layer, what I've done again is I've EQ'd it, I've turned it up a little bit, and I've put on a pitch drift. So because it's just a one shot, I wanted to give it some variation. So the pitch drift slightly changes the pitch of each hit. Okay, so that sounds excellent, and I'm very, very tired. I can feel myself like struggling to say my words properly as I record this, but we will carry on. I'm sure it's still going to be informative. So then we have basically, we've got our kick with the layer, we've got our snare separated, we've got our two hats. Already sounding good, like you could kind of leave it like that, but I thought I want to jazz it up and add some more stuff in. So what I've done for the snare is there was one snare at the end of the break which was a bit weird. It was this one, and it's got this like extra sort of white noise on it almost. And I didn't really like it in the main beat, but I thought I'd use it as a layer, as like a ghost hit essentially. So this is like the extra snare from the break that I didn't use the first time round. And I've basically just turned it right down and added on like a bunch of delay with a dual delay. So in the kind of beat, it would sound like this. Okay, so I've just used it as this little ghost hit, and I've kind of timed that along with my basses a bit. So I was kind of moving it around until it fitted with the whole groove. But yeah, that's a nice little shuffle in the background, a little snare kind of flam effect, if you will. It's another cool thing that I've done there. And then, this is another really great thing that I was able to do by chopping up the break and using a separate kick. Because here is like my main kick with the top part to it. And I wanted to add like a ghost kick. And a great way to do this and have the ghost kick already be different was I thought I would use the kick from the original break, which is obviously not as powerful as this one. So this is the other kick that was actually from the first break, but with its low end still in. And I've put that on a separate channel to make a ghost kick out of it, and just turned it down 3 dB. So it's got its low end in, it's just a bit quieter in the mix, you know. But that sounds really, really nice just in this one little position here. Okay, so I've got a nice little natural ghost kick, which has a bit of a tonal difference to the main one, you know. So that was a really nice little adjustment that I did. And then the next thing was I started adding in a couple of other samples from outside the break now. And I found like a folder of really vintage, old school kind of drum fills. And I've really just used them in the high end. So these sort of natural recorded kicks and snares. And basically just taken off the transient on them quite a lot, especially on the kick. I've taken it down just a little bit, but I've really taken the sustain down a lot. And on the snare, again, I've also probably just taken, similar kind of thing, taking the transient off a bit, but shortening it so it's quite tight. Then I've EQ'd them both, taken out like loads of low end on both of them. Yeah. And they're just providing this extra little character on top of the kick and snare then, you know? And you'll notice on these as well, from this kind of, there's this whole sort of drum fill was the sample, you know? And it had different little kicks and different little snare hits. And I've just taken 2 for the kick and 2 for the snare. So you kind of hear on the snare there's 2 versions. Pitch down and then pitch up. And I think it's a similar kind of thing on the kick as well. Yeah, there's like a slightly different pitching on both the samples. And that's just going to help it keep it more interesting as well. Even if it's a background layer and you don't hear it as much, the fact it's got a little variation in the pitch will keep the whole drum group give it more life, you know? I mean, with the snare layer, you definitely hear that one. The kick one is a bit more subtle. But yeah, that was really, really nice. And then I think I used the same drum fill, or it might have been another one, just from a random like vintage fills sample pack that I've probably had for years, and found a couple of little ghost hits again. These sort of like kick or tom kind of samples. And I've just put a couple of those in with the beat as well here. Because they're kind of ghost hits, I make sure to turn them down a bit as well. Turn them down like 6 dB. Tighten them up a bit by taking the sustain down. And yeah, that's a nice little extra addition. And then 2 more things. With the snares, like you can never have enough snare layers, in my opinion. So I wanted to layer up the snare with a clap as well. So I found 2 claps. The second 2 are a little bit shorter. I've started the sample like a little bit later and then dragged it back to the left so that they're a bit tighter towards the end. It kind of sounded like it needed to be tighter for the second half. But these clap layers, again, all I really do with the layering is, you know, take off a bit of the transient, shorten the sustain quite a lot to make it nice and tight. And then with the EQ again, just go up like quite high and yeah, take out a bunch of low end for that. So it kind of blends with the snare without really taking out too much of or conflicting too much with the original one, you know? These ones are a little bit sharp still, the transient. I might take that down a bit more. It's a little bit better. And then, yeah, all that together so far. Nice and crunchy and organic. And then one last thing, just to jazz up the background a bit. I've got a nice like bit of ride noise here, which is just like this kind of like tailing out of the end of a ride, and I've just like looped it or yeah, repeated it every time the kick hits the main kick, so it will always start like on there, you know. And you hear it's got quite a lot of a pitch drift going on as well, which keeps it a bit more interesting it gives it a bit more energy. So a pitch drift on the ride to get it moving around in pitch a little bit. And then with the EQ again, taking out a lot of the low end, side chaining it to the kick to give it a bit of a sucking motion. And again, a little bit more low end taken out. And it's really, really down in the mix, like -12 or so. So it's really just in the background to fill out the sort of emptiness, you know. But sort of, you know, 70% of it comes from the original break still, you know. But I've just made sure to chop it onto different layers so that I can have my way with it. And now, if there's any things in the mix down when I add in the basses and everything again, you know, any of these little hats I don't like, this little shuffle I don't like, the kick layer I decide is too much, or the claps are too much, or whatever, you know, most importantly, I've got control of the volumes of everything independently. That's the main thing, you know. Of course, it's great to EQ stuff differently and affect it differently with other plugins, but the main purpose is really to have that volume control of each of the individual hits, because as you play it with your basses and everything else, you will find you might need to adjust the volumes on just certain hits, and that's the key thing why I would suggest always breaking up your break into different channels, my G's. On the post-processing, I haven't done much. I've just added a little bit of saturation drive from the kilohertz distortion, and that just kind of glues it all together a little bit. Could probably do a little bit more post-processing, but already sounds pretty nice and crunchy as it is. So once again, geez, I'm really sorry if I feel a bit, if I seem a bit exhausted today, because I am. Let's hope tonight I get a better night's sleep than I did last night. And yeah, aside from that, my G's, tomorrow we're going to crack straight on, as I said, in sickness or health. I'm doing one video per day. And tomorrow, with a bit more sleep, hopefully, I'm going to do a video on an epic filtered drum break. So we're going to take what we've made so far, and we're going to turn it into a whole new break and do some more experimental stuff with it, and show you how you can use that to start building like a unique intro. So see you tomorrow, my G's.